Well, the tragic story of Stephanie Dowells and her marriage to convicted murderer David Brinson sheds light on the complex and often perilous dynamics that can arise when individuals seek to redeem those with deeply troubled pasts. Stephanie was a 62-year-old woman, accomplished mother and grandmother, who was known for her deep faith and compassionate nature. Her involvement with a predator who was serving 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole ultimately led to her untimely death during a conjugal visit at a California prison. Hey, welcome to Profiling Evil, your go-to true crime channel where we dive pretty deeply into these criminal investigations, but we try to provide a little bit of education as we go along. So if you're passionate about unraveling mysteries and understanding the psychology of crime, you've come to the right place. But before we jump into today's case, I hope that you'll take a moment, hit that like and subscribe button down below. Subscribe to our channel, make sure you have notifications turned on, and please consider giving us a thumbs up. It really helps us continue to bring good content forward. And if you like what you're seeing, share Profiling Evil with your friends and anyone else that you think loves true crime as much as you do. So let's get started on this one. This case is one that twists and unfolds over 3 decades. Beginning with the brutal 1990 quadruple murder that ended maybe in a second suspicious death behind prison walls. And we're going to say, until this guy is proven guilty in a court of law, we have to presume that David Brinson is innocent. But the one that he isn't innocent in, he was convicted of, all started on June 12th, 1990 in Los Angeles, in the kind of Wilshire district. David Brinson was just 23 years old when he and 2 of his accomplices targeted the garage apartment of a 59-year-old guy named Robert Marks. Now, Marks was a retired tavern owner, but Brinson believed that he was also a major drug dealer in the area, and that suspicion would end in tragedy. You see, that evening, Marks had 3 friends over, guys that were named Gene McCullers, a 28-year-old guy, a guy named Celadino Ligitas, he was 33 if I remember right, and William Terry, 27 years old. They were all gathered to watch a basketball game on television, completely unaware that they were going to become victims in a robbery gone horribly wrong. Now, Brinson and his crew of thugs stormed the apartment, expecting to find drugs and cash, but what they found instead was just a small stash of marijuana. Barely anything worth stealing, and certainly not something worth murdering over. But instead of cutting their losses, Brinson escalated. He forced the 4 men to lie down on the floor, and then he shot each one of them in the back of the head, execution style, in this cold, calculated way. Well, the next day when this all came to light, neighbors were stunned. Now, they knew Marks. He was kind of a quiet guy. Some even suspected that he had some shady goings-ons going on in the area because he had people coming and going at all hours of the day and night. And Marks had installed 6 locks on his door. 4 of them were deadbolts. And this was just on the 2 front doors that he had. So they kind of wondered about that and the fact that there were loud arguments that came from the apartment late at night. And again, in the neighborhood, there were definitely whispers of drug dealings, but nothing could justify the carnage that took place in that home. Now, let's just kind of fast forward to October of 1993 when justice finally caught up with Brinson. He was convicted of 4 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstance. That special circumstance under California law made him eligible for the death penalty. So along with robbery and the attempted robbery charges, he now was facing the death penalty for these murders. The trial was intense by everything that I've been able to read, and the facts of the case were horrifying. Frankly, the stakes couldn't be much higher. But by February of '94, the penalty phase wrapped up, but not with the outcome that many people expected. The jury was deadlocked on the death sentence. So in a deal to avoid a retrial, David Brinson agreed to waive his right to an appeal in exchange for a sentence of 4 consecutive life terms without parole. Prosecutors accepted it, and the Superior Court judge, a guy named George Trammell, sealed the deal. The DA said, quote, "This saves taxpayers a lot of money." But more importantly, it gave closure to the families, and Brinson would never walk again free. For decades, that seemed to be the end of the story. Brinson simply disappeared behind bars, serving his time at many facilities, including Mule Creek State Prison. But in December of 2022, he made a surprising move by filing a motion on his own that asked for a chance to present mitigating evidence tied to his youth at the time of the murders. He said that the evidence could potentially be used in a future parole hearing, and that the laws that had changed, case law that allowed youthful offenders a chance to build a record of rehabilitation, applied to him. But on June 11th, 2024, the California Court of Appeal shut the door on that and upheld the denial that Brinson was trying to make. The ruling reinforced that people serving life without parole sentences for special circumstance murders are ineligible for the youthful offender parole hearing kind of idea. This law, the court said, was constitutional, and saying Brinson would remain exactly where he was. Well, it was during these times that Brinson met Stephanie Dowells. Now, it's unclear how they met, but I have a few theories. You see, Stephanie Dowells was a woman with a full life. She was a mother, a grandmother, a business owner, and by all accounts, a woman of deep faith and purpose. Her family knew her as a kind-hearted and giving person, the kind of person who saw goodness in others even when it was hard for the rest of us to find. Her mother would often counsel her with words to the effect of, "You can't save everyone." But she continued to try. And somehow she began a relationship with David Brinson, this convicted murderer of 4 people. Now, I suspect her loved ones were stunned. I mean, how could somebody that was so full of light become entangled with someone whose past was drenched in darkness?
A notorious LA killer serving life in prison without the possibility of parole reportedly strangled his wife to death during a conjugal visit. 54-year-old David Brinson was convicted in the 1990 execution-style murders of 4 men in the Mid-Wilshire district. Authorities say last November, while at Mule Creek State Prison in Northern California, he told officers his 62-year-old wife Stephanie had passed out during a conjugal visit. She was declared dead at the scene. 4 months later, a coroner confirmed that she was strangled to death. The Amador County District Attorney is awaiting the prison's full report before filing charges against Brinson. Brinson has since been transferred to a state prison in Stockton.
To the outsiders, it was a mystery. But in the world of psychology and human behavior, it's actually a pattern that isn't entirely uncommon. There's a particular kind of hope that drives people like Stephanie, one that's rooted in redemption. Now, her family shared that she and Brinson would read scriptures together over the phone. She was encouraging him to pursue personal growth, and she saw her role not only as a wife, but as a spiritual guide. And if you caught that wife, you'll realize that somewhere along the lines, she married this guy, although I haven't been able to find the wedding paperwork. Now, she believed in transformation, and she believed that she could help bring it about. You know, it's kind of easy to see how that kind of conviction can form the foundation of a wacky relationship like this. When somebody's incarcerated, especially if it's for life, they often rely on the emotional lifelines that are offered by people on the outside. In turn, those on the outside might feel empowered by providing love, mentorship, or spiritual guidance. And for somebody like Stephanie, this may have seemed like a calling of sorts, a way to help reshape a soul that society had already written off. But here's where these noble impulses can turn dangerous. Experts have long warned about the psychological risks of entering into relationships with convicted people of violent crimes, particularly when those crimes suggest psychopathy or deep-seated behavioral issues. I think of a study by Dr. Sheila Eisenberg, the author of Women Who Love Men Who Kill. She studied these kinds of relationships extensively, and she notes that women who seek to save these men are often acting out of an unresolved emotional pattern, perhaps an urge to heal others because they couldn't heal something in themselves or their pasts. You know, the danger isn't always physical. It can be emotional, psychological, or tragically in Stephanie's case, fatal. There's also a false sense of control that can come with these kinds of relationships. With the inmate confined, the outside partner might feel a sense of security. They can offer love, guidance, and structure without the day-to-day risk that comes with traditional relationships. Some might even speculate that for some certain individuals, marrying someone in prison for life offers the emotional fulfillment of commitment without the vulnerability of cohabitation or the fear of betrayal. Stephanie's family and social media activity suggests that she was dedicated to her faith and committed to helping others. Now, family members noted that she and Brinson again would read the Bible together, that she was encouraging him to become a better person. This inclination to guide and rehabilitate may have stemmed from a belief in redemption, that every individual is within reach of saving. Well, such convictions can lead compassionate individuals to engage with incarcerated persons, hoping to facilitate some kind of positive change in their lives. In some cases, individuals are drawn to those who have committed crimes. It's a phenomenon known as Hybristophilia. The condition involves attraction to individuals who have committed heinous acts, often due to the perception of danger or a desire to nurture, or the belief that they can change this person to become better. While it's unclear if Stephanie experienced this phenomenon, her relationship with Brinson reflects elements observed in such kinds of cases. You see, marrying an inmate serving a life sentence can provide a form of controlled intimacy. For some, it offers emotional connection and societal status of marriage, again, without these daily challenges that come with cohabitation. This arrangement can seem appealing to individuals who desire companionship, but also value a degree of autonomy. However, this dynamic can be deceptive, as it might overlook the inherent risks and complexities involved with these kinds of wacky relationships. Engaging in personal relationships with individuals convicted of violent crime carries significant risk. And while there is a desire to help and rehabilitate, and it's commendable, it's crucial to recognize that the potential dangers are involved in these kinds of activities. Mental health professionals caution against underestimating the complexities of such relationships. Dr. Catherine Ramsland, a professor of forensic psychology, emphasizes that individuals may believe that they see the real person behind the criminal facade, and that might lead them to think that they can help or change that person. However, this perception can be perilous, as it might ignore the underlying pathology that led to the criminal behavior in the first place. Which leads us to November 13th, 2024. Stephanie Dowells went to the prison to meet with David Brinson during a conjugal visit at Mule Creek. Now, she was 62 years old and he was 54. These types of family visits are rare and heavily regulated, but they're offered to inmates who demonstrate some good behavior and meet strict eligibility criteria. We have to assume that Brinson somehow met this, but keep in mind, this is a guy convicted of 4 murders, and somehow he's still qualified. And this wasn't the first conjugal visit by all accounts from what I've been able to find online between the two. So she had gone there before and felt relatively safe. But that night was different. Brinson called prison staff around 2 a.m. saying that Stephanie had passed out. Well, the prison correctional staff responded quickly, followed by prison paramedics, but it was too late. Stephanie was pronounced dead at 2:51 a.m. Now, initially, details were scarce, but when the Amador County coroner later released its findings, the truth was pretty dang chilling. They say Stephanie had been strangled. Her death had been ruled a homicide. Well, Stephanie's family was devastated, although they suspected that this might be the case. Her son, Armand Torres, told reporters that his mother was a kind religious woman who regularly read the Bible with Brinson, encouraging him to be a better man. And he said, how on earth could they let this just happen? Given the history that this guy has, how is it even possible for them to be together unsupervised, was his question. And perhaps many of your question. Because to me, that's the million-dollar question. As of March 2025, Brinson hadn't been charged in her death. Now, he's been transferred to another facility, and the Amador County DA's office said they're waiting for the full investigative report to come back from the prison. So I got to give Brinson the benefit of the doubt, and I got to remind you that he's not been named a murder suspect, but he certainly is a person of interest at this point. But the coroner has clearly indicated that Stephanie Dowells, while on a conjugal visit with David Brinson, alone in one of those family visit rooms at the California Penal Facility, died as a result of strangulation. There wasn't anybody else in the room, just the two of them. And Brinson's history shows, if he's the reason she died, that violent behavior doesn't end at the prison gates. Despite his life sentence, despite his decades behind bars, despite his spiritual discussions and signs of personal reform, Stephanie died by strangulation during an overnight visit with David Brinson. Her death has been ruled a homicide, and it shatters the hopes that perhaps love and scripture could undo what violence had carved into Brinson's past. So what's the takeaway for others who might feel this need to help the unreachable? Because helping others, especially those imprisoned or struggling with their past, is clearly a noble feat. But there are safer, healthier ways to make a difference. Mentorship programs, rehabilitative support groups, restorative justice circles, these all offer real pathways for support and redemption that don't place a person's emotional or physical well-being at risk. Empathy is something that can be incredibly powerful, but without boundaries, it can also be perilous. Stephanie Dowells' belief in change, her belief in forgiveness, all are laudable things, but in the end, her story is nothing more than a heartbreaking reminder that belief alone isn't enough, and that sometimes loving someone doesn't mean stepping into their darkness. It means finding safer ways to light the path forward for both them and you.
Family, and they're demanding answers. They want to know why an inmate with such a violent history like this was allowed to have unsupervised visits in the first place.
The most giving like-minded person.
62-year-old Stephanie Dowells was always trying to help others, her mother, Ovita Wilson, says.
I would often tell my sweetheart, you can't save the world.
Dowells was a mother herself to 2 sons, grandmother to 6. She was a hairstylist and a small business owner in the Los Angeles area, known to her family as Stevie. We spoke to them on Zoom.
Stevie was literally the glue that held the family together,
making her loss all the more difficult.
We were just devastated.
Dowells died during an overnight visit with an inmate at Mule Creek State Prison in Ione just before 3 a.m. last November. Now, 4 months later, the Amador County coroner confirmed her family's fears, finding the death was a homicide. The coroner says she was strangled.
How could they just, let this happen and just don't get it?
Armand Torres says the prison should be held accountable. He says his mom was visiting her husband, David Brinson, there.
They would read the Bible together. He was in school in there because she was pushing him to try to be this better person.
But Brinson is serving 4 consecutive life terms with a 20-year determinate sentence on top of that, without the possibility of parole, all after his 1993 conviction of 4 murders.
My mom was just left alone, and she, called for help, I'm sure, and there's nothing she could do.
Officials say the criminal investigation is still underway, so as of now, no one's been charged with Dowells' murder. But it happened during a family visit, which the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation website describes as a visit in private apartment-like facilities on prison grounds that can last approximately 30 to 40 hours. It was just after 2 a.m. on November 13th when CDCR says Brinson used the phone in that apartment-like facility to tell officers his wife had passed out.
Given the history that this guy has already, we kind of just, wanted to know, how is it even, possible for them to be unsupervised?
The CDCR website shows inmates blocked from those privileges are limited to those on death row, those convicted of sex offenses, those going through the reception process upon arrival to a prison, or anyone under disciplinary restrictions. There's no mention of multiple murder convictions.
Do you think that policy should change moving forward?
It has to. There has to be something has to be done, because it's not fair.
CDCR says inmates have to meet strict criteria for these family visits, like sustained good behavior, for example. And they say the visits are meant to support family connection and rehabilitation. And Dowells' family did say that she had visited Brinson several times before this, and those visits seem to have gone well. So they say at the time they didn't really think much of it, like they now believe they probably should have. Back to you.
Stephanie's family searching for answers. Her mother called Stephanie the glue that held the family together, and her daughter-in-law described her as someone who simply believed in redemption and second chances. She spent her final hours with a man who stole 4 lives and now may have taken a 5th. The saga of David Brinson is a haunting example of how violence can echo across decades. What began as a robbery in 1990 continued to raise disturbing questions about justice, safety, and the true cost of trusting a man who wore the face of remorse, but perhaps never left the wolf that he was hiding under that sheep's clothing. Which leaves the question of whether there are alternative ways to support rehabilitation. And yes, there are. But there are ways to do things safely and more effectively. Volunteer work, engaging with organizations that support prisoner rehabilitation through education, mentorship, or skill developments can make some meaningful impacts without getting personally entangled in these things. Looking at advocacy groups that supporting policy that changes and promotes rehab programs within the prison system can lead to improvement. And there are community programs where you can participate in community initiatives that assist former inmates in reintegrating into society. But again, don't invite them into your home. Don't give them personal information about what you do or information about where you live. Now, as I wrap things up, I wanted to share California's conjugal visit policy, which permits these visits to happen for eligible inmates. The visits can occur in private apartment-like facilities on prison grounds, and they can last up to 30 or 40 hours. Now, the inmate has to check in every hour, I think 4 times during the time period, to let people know that he's still there. The California Department of Corrections states that all incarcerated individuals are eligible to receive visits unless they have temporarily lost that due to some kind of disciplinary action. However, the case of Stephanie Dowells is raising significant concern about these policies. Her family questions how an inmate with Brinson's violent history is granted unsupervised visits. Again, how could they let this happen, is the words of her son. This tragedy underscores the need for critical examination of the policies that govern inmate visitation privileges, especially for those convicted of severe offenses. The heartbreaking outcome of this case surfaces the complexities and the dangers of seeking to redeem individuals with violent pasts. This idea that we could have personal involvement that might somehow interact instead of professional involvement. While the desire to help is noble, it's essential to approach such situations with caution and awareness of the potential risks. And I'd like to know your thoughts on this one, and I hope you'll put them down below. Please weigh in on the comments made by others. Now, this is a sensitive subject, so please be kind and constructive. And thanks for joining me on this journey. Don't forget to connect with Profiling Evil on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter for more updates, more insights. And if you like audio podcasts, we've got you covered, folks. Subscribe to Profiling Evil podcasts on your favorite podcast platform. That way, you'll catch us on the go. And if you're looking for more content, head over to our website at profilingevil.com. There you can check out our missing persons, unsolved homicides map, look at our story maps, and you can sign up for our digital newsletter, the BOLO. That stands for Be on the Lookout. And the only way you can get that thing is by signing up at profilingevil.com. And while you're at the website, if you're a fan of true crime books, check out my books, Deceived, an investigative memoir of the Zion Society cult, or She Knew No Fear. That's the story of my great-great-grandmother's murder in 1891. In the book, I share how I solved her murder 130 years later, and I think you'd really enjoy it. So thanks so much for your support of Profiling Evil. We'll see you soon at the next crime scene.